Good afternoon, everyone. We do have a quorum now, so we'll get the meeting underway. Welcome to the meeting. Welcome to any members of the public and to the team from Dunedin Partnership. Firstly, apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillors Hilary Calvert and Aaron Hawkins, who's absent on council business.
I'll move Chairman that be accepted.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Mike. All in favour?
Aye.
Carried. Confirmation of the agenda. I don't have any reason to change the agenda. In that case, I'll move that the agenda be as confirmed. Thank you. 8. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Declarations of interest. Just a reminder that if you have a conflict with any of these items that you identify there. So, it brings us to our first agenda item, the 60 Summer Jobs Business Internship Program. Welcome, team. So, so councillors, you are aware of who's at the table. David Thompson, who is one of the Dunedin Partnership, and Peter Harris, of course, you will recognise, who is here representing the Polytechnic because their representative couldn't make it. Gentlemen.
Okay, basically the 60 Summer Jobs Business Project has requested 72,000 from the Dunedin Partnership to fund 48 interns into Dunedin businesses. And the reason we've come here is basically the funding request is more than the $50,000, which, if that's the case, it must come before the Economic Development Committee. So it's been through the Dunedin Partnership who've attached their recommendation as well. So with that, through the Chair, open for questions. Both the partners on either side here are heavily involved because a lot of the interns basically come from the Polytech and the university.
Questions, councillors? No questions. If not,
Happy to move. Well, yes, I was just going to say I'm very happy to
move it in a second.
I'm not surprised there's no questions because I think the program is a very good program, well documented. So I will certainly move the resolution.
So Lee, as mover, do you wish to speak to it? I'll just note also that the reason that the Dunedin Partnership decided to increase the funding slightly for this one and to continue with this program is that it has proved very successful, and we'll make a little bit more effort this year to check on the longevity of the employment beyond the summer break. We do know that about 25-30% of the students continue on in employment, but we're going to try and clarify whether those are new positions or replacement positions from this year going forward. So we know that we're creating jobs, we're not just providing an employment forum that replaces a position, but the information we have at this stage, having looked back, is that most of the jobs are new positions. They're actually increasing the number of employees in the businesses rather than just replacing an employee. So we thought it was a very strong project to continue with.
Through the Chair, could I just endorse Chanel O'Brien? Chanel's put a huge amount of effort into this particular project and continues to do so, and I'd just like to thank Chanel.
Very good. In that case, Gingy.
Well, I just want to highlight that I think that is a really worthwhile piece of work, what you guys are planning on doing, because that is my concern reading this, is that we don't have that long-term data. I think it would be worthwhile not just knowing that those jobs remain for the year, but that we're not replacing we're not doing 1-year jobs, as it were, which are then replaced the following year. So the follow-up has to be not just 6 months after, but 12 months after and 18 months after, for us to know that they are in fact continuing. The other thing that wasn't 100% clear to me from this paper was who is actually hosting that funding. So whose bank account is that funding being transferred into? Who is ultimately responsible for delivering on this? Clearly it's the Grow Partnership, but who is that entity? And the third thing which I would like to see us focusing more on is, I appreciate that the sectors engaged in this particular program have expanded over time. However, I don't think that we're necessarily making the same noises about the potential of this program for example, our not-for-profit sector or our social enterprise sector that we could be. I stand to be corrected on that, but just simply looking at those who have engaged with this program to date, it seems that there is potential in this project, not just within the sectors which have engaged to date, but right across our employment sector. And it would be nice to see a continuing breadth or growth in the breadth of organisations involving themselves in this.
Through the Chair, Chanel, would you like to comment on Councillor McTavish's?
Yes, I quite agree actually, and in fact the program has attracted the interest of the Dunedin Fringe Festival, for example, and in fact next week I'm having a meeting with Otago Hospice as well, because there are some opportunities certainly within the not-for-profit and social enterprise communities to take on interns in the future. So that is an area that I would certainly like to see grow as well.
Just on the entity, it is Enterprise Dunedin who runs
That's correct.
the
Yes.
program.
It is, yes.
Okay, any other speakers? Not Lee, do you want your right to reply? In that case, I'll put it. All in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. Our next item on the agenda is on the delegations. There's... I'm going to...
Okay, this is in reality, as the I call it project budget, not a grant unfortunately, but with the project budgets now, the delegations outlined are in the background there, where I can approve up to $10,000, from 10,000 to 50 by following 3 people: the Chief Executive, or the Chief Financial Officer, the Chair of the Finance Committee or Deputy Chair, the Chair of the Economic Development Strategy Grow Dunedin Partnership, or another non-DCC member of that group. For any requests over 50,000, they come here to the Economic Development Committee. Where it's not really plain what happens with grants, well, not with grants, but if the allocated amount goes over 50,000. In other words, if you get a project which is 49,000, then you get ongoing, for example, 4 projects of maybe $5,000 each within the context of the main project. Does it need to come back every time to this particular committee? What we're looking for is a situation where we can take, where that's been allocated, where it goes over 50,000 up to 100,000 for sub-projects within the main project. It goes up to 100,000, it goes through the 3 people mentioned before. We've got the delegations for the 10 to 50,000. If there's one single project that is in excess of 50,000, it must still come back through the Economic Development Committee. If the agglomeration goes over 100,000, it definitely comes back here again to the Economic Development Committee.
This arose from the Grow Dunedin Partnership when we were looking at an application for a grant to fund Project Offshore, which is part of the Education Uplift section of our work. they had a couple of smaller grants, I think around the $20,000. So the grant that they were asking for here was $49,500. In the delegation, it would seem that we could potentially sign it off under the delegation, but the partnership wasn't comfortable that the delegations made it clear that that was council, or the intent of council. So the issue for consideration today is purely that, do we look at the individual element projects within a major project area as being the $50,000 maximum delegation, or do we say we allow up to $100,000 for, say, the education uplift projects, but no element below that may exceed $50,000 without coming to this committee for approval. Councillor Magnus.
Is there any reason, from an urgency point of view, where you would want this recommendation to come through? Like, do the requests for these grants come up in such a way sometimes where they catch you off guard, where something needs to happen very quickly, and for reasons of time it can't come back to the committee? Like, do you sometimes need this money out of the blue in less than 6 weeks?
Through the chair, this may not arise frequently, but it can arise, and what it means in reality is that we would need to come back. For example, the education one, this project offshore, which is the 49,500 the chair referred to before. Then we have another of others, Project Stay, which is up to 9,000. Project Care for support, which could be up to 15,000. Project Care for events, that could be up to 5,000. So there's a whole series of projects we're trying the coordinator is trying to complete or get going through in this financial year. So they can put a wee bit of pressure on if we want to move those projects forward, but we're still going to wait to come through the council process.
To put the question a different way, if the chair will indulge me, if you've got a year's worth of projects, you would normally have some knowledge in advance that these things are coming up. So my question really is, apart from the hassle of having to come to this committee, is there a real time impediment with these projects where you don't know about it in advance and you have to move very quickly, as you would have, for instance, if you were purchasing some land and you had the opportunity to suddenly purchase some land that came onto the market?
There is some urgency sometimes because, for example, our coordinator is only funded for 1 year, and that money has come to her, basically her salary has come through that economic development strategy budget. So we're in a situation where there is a consideration required for speed to work through some of those projects.
I think perhaps just to clarify it, I think most of the larger sums of money are probably planned and therefore capable of coming before this committee. The reason we need clarity is in the case of this particular application, if the delegation doesn't change, then there is another 5-week cycle before that funding comes on a paper back to council. So originally this was to enable the smaller sums of money to be moved through without having to bring papers to council. Where we find ourselves now is that we do have this issue of multiple applications. So we don't want, as a partnership, we don't want to be in any way seen that we might be slicing up a project into pieces less than $50,000 so that we don't have to come to council with it. So there's a transparency element in this. I think for the next financial year, we should be in the position where we have budget lines built into the economic development budget that comes to council for annual plan. The reason we've got the problem this year is that again we have a budget which was not defined by specific project area, and so that is why the delegation is there, and I would expect that delegation won't be necessary after this financial year. So it's a transparency issue. One thing that has been suggested, and I think we will do, is to bring the budget and expenditure to date paper to each of the standing committee meetings, so you can see then what has been approved and what budget remains, because there are now tentative budgets starting to be put in place for the major project areas.
I think what will happen through the chair is that there's probably only a couple of the main budgets where this will occur. The other budgets won't affect. But a couple of the bigger projects, but there's a number of projects within them underneath the main project. This is the one that's going to affect. Well, these are the ones.
So for instance, Project Shanghai in China may well exceed $100,000. That is not because a lot of that money has been spent in direct work with Shanghai, but because it funds a coordinator. So there's a labour content. Education is another one where we fund the coordinator who does the work in the project, and so that is the significant portion of the total funding that will be spent in that area. Nicole?
A question. I noticed in the recommendation it talks about amending the delegation of allocations from the EDS fund to allow the CEO and chairs of finance and EDS growth partnership to approve applications. I take it that means not individually, but together.
Up to the amount of 100,000.
No, all three.
All three.
Yeah, you need all three. It's
All
not,
three, yes. Sorry.
it could be read either way. It's all three.
It must be all three.
Councillor McTavish.
Well, I support the recommendation, but I think it could be worded better simply by saying one amends the delegation for allocations from the EDS, or amends the delegations for allocations from the EDS to read as follows, and then copy and paste the amended resolution under option 2, which is very clear about what it's meaning, whereas I find the recommendations a bit unclear.
So you would be adding, if you wanted to do that, you would be adding to the list of those points A, B and C on 5.2, either the qualification that in any major project area expenditure beyond 100,000, or you wouldn't. So either we stick with the current delegations.
Oh no, it is amended. So under option
So
2,
you'd put those in.
I think under B, if you look under option 2B, it's amended to read, and where the aggregate of projects within a project area in any financial year does not exceed 100,000. Yeah, so I think it as amended, it's quite clear, and we could just stick that into 1.
Yep.
I'm happy to move in that direction.
Thank you. We have a mover. We have a seconder. Carl?
Yeah, I'd like I think the recommendations are not specific or not clear enough. And my concern would be satisfied with putting in the recommendation somewhere that for an application that does exceed, single application that does exceed $50,000 still has to come back. It doesn't say that, so it's just a little bit ambiguous, I think.
Certainly.
So do we have some wording, because I would imagine most people would like to see.
Yeah, so I think that Councillor Bazette's concern is covered off if we, so on page 5.2 of the report, under where it says option 2, it says the delegation could be redrafted as follows, and it starts from that the council.
Yep.
So I think if we just cut and paste the bit that reads from that the council approves down to the Economic Development Committee at the end of C on page 5.3. That, and put that under 1. So 1 would then read that the committee amend the delegations for allocations from the EDS fund as follows, with the cut and pasted bit. And then 2, as it currently stands on the order paper. I think that clarifies the matter.
Would councillors like to see that up on the screen? Or are you all comfortable, you know what it's saying? All okay? Well, we do have a mover and a seconder, so we'll end the debate. Is there any debate? You don't want...
I'll just say I think it's a pragmatic approach to clarifying the situation, noting that we'll be reviewing at the end of this financial year anyway, what we've decided.
Councillor Memphis.
I have general reservations about grants that are over $50,000 or even over $10,000 going out with limited approval when there is ample opportunity for it to come to this committee. I believe that sticking with the current delegations is already pretty generous in terms of allowing grants to be put through by the Chief Executive or the Chief of Finance, whatever. Councillor Staines, you've already said that most of the larger sums are properly planned. I would like to insist that the smaller sums be planned as well. I don't like the idea that we're giving grants at short notice to anybody. I don't think that doing this sort of thing in a hurry is in the public interest. So much as all I approved of the previous item, the jobs issue, I think that unless some real urgency can be shown, this committee needs to know about and needs to approve in advance what is being granted. The suggestion that we will always see what has been approved is one that, quite frankly, makes me feel that I'm a rubber stamp here, and I don't want to do that. So I will vote against the current proposal, mainly because I think that the status quo, what we already have, gives sufficient flexibility, and I'm not convinced that there's any real argument for particular speed here to let individuals basically sign off grants. I think this committee needs to see them. We need to be much more careful about grants. I haven't been convinced that a lot of the grants that we've allowed in the past have actually been particularly good value for money, and I'd like to see them further scrutinised. This motion in front of us doesn't do that.
Councillor Wilson.
I've got no problems with part 1 as amended, but part 2 just seems to me to be running counter to what you actually said at Dunedin had, and that surely we're reviewing it as part of annual plan rather than after this year, because we can't do both. And I actually think the annual plan is a better time to do it, because you're going to be much better. This is the first year jitters or consideration. I actually almost would rather leave that and see what happens at annual plan and pick it up later. But that's being relatively pedantic, sorry. Well, the next one is a long-term plan that we're doing it, and that's when the chair said himself that we'll have a much better idea of the budget coming into that meeting of how it's going to work. So why review it at the end of this financial year if we've already reviewed it in the annual plan process? It's pedantic. I appreciate it.
Councillor Thompson.
Look, I support this. The reason I support it is that in essence what we've done is we've allocated a budget and we've actually put a governance group over that budget to determine how it should spend it, and that's the Grow Dunedin partnership. And I think it's always fraught when you have a governance group charged with making a decision about budgets, and then you have another governance group that can come in at too low a level and re-debate that when they haven't actually been involved in the process that led to the original deliberation. I think that's actually bad governance. You could equally well envisage that this could have simply been an operational budget that was overseen by that committee and needn't have come back here at all. The very fact that it is coming back here now reflects the fact that the elected representatives and management wanted to ensure that it couldn't be suggested that money was being allocated in a way that was designed to get around that lower level. So I mean that in itself should be reflective of the position. I think that this is it's simply a way of managing a situation, and I think that the very fact that the people charged with making that decision were concerned enough to bring it back here to review the delegations, I think should give some comfort to the fact that if it does look like this is being used to get a way around a set of requirements, then that's not going to be acceptable.
Speakers, right of reply.
Just briefly, I think Councillor Vandervis in his speech talked to the grants in the past and concerns about grants in the past, and I think everyone who was around this table at the last triennium shared those concerns with grants, and I think management shared those concerns with grants, which is why we developed the new economic development strategy, and why as part of that those grants ground to a halt. So I think it's important that we do make the distinction between grants to businesses which have been made in the past and this new system of funding for initiatives which is overseen by a governance group. So I think that that distinction needs to be made.
All right, I'm going to put it. All in favour? Against?
No, recorded please.
That brings us to the last item on the agenda, notification of agenda items for Chair. Anybody has any burning issues that would like considered? If not, that brings us to the close of this